Hello and welcome to another video. Today we're going to be talking about how I set up a virtual machine, which is where I do all of my software development, at least on stream. I have other computers where I install directly to the hardware, but we're going to set up a Linux environment today and kind of show you how I configure my virtual machine. So hopefully you can follow this as a little bit of a tutorial and set one up yourself. So let's jump into that. So the first thing that we're going to need is to install a virtual machine manager. I use VirtualBox, and you can, go to virtualbox.org and click on, this button and run the installer and do all that sort of stuff. But I have it already installed, and so we're going to, walk through how I would use an already installed VirtualBox. I'm sure you can click through a setup and figure that out yourself. So let's zoom in on VirtualBox so we can just manage that. There we go, got fancy scenes for this video. And I'm basically gonna walk you through how I would create this. I guess before we zoom in, we're gonna need one other thing. We're going to need a Linux image. And the one I'm gonna be using today is Ubuntu 2004. Ubuntu focal download. So you can just Google this and you'll land on a page like this. And we're going to be picking the desktop image. You could set up a server virtual machine, but the desktop has stuff you can click on. So we're going to do that, and you'll click through to this, and that's actually going to start downloading. We don't want to do that. It's about 2.5 gigabytes, so you'll need enough space for that and enough time. I've pre-downloaded this, so we don't have to sit here, and now wait for it to download for 10 minutes. And they have a bunch of other options for downloading too, like you can download it with BitTorrent, and that tends to be, well, for me it was faster than downloading from their website. But anyway, once you have that, now we can jump into this. Zoom scene, cool. You'll see I have some other virtual machines already here. These are ones that I've set up for myself in the past, and I'm going to follow basically the same steps that I did for those. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to click this new button, and that's going to take us into a little wizard. There is actually an expert mode here, but I found that the expert mode is actually worse than the guided mode. It's like they didn't test it at all, but anyway. The first thing we're going to do is type in the name here. VirtualBox is actually kind of smart and will pick up on specific names and do some auto configuration for you. So it's kind of important to name it Ubuntu or something. You'll see that it already noticed that we're Linux and changed some stuff there. I usually like to name it with the version of what we're going to install, but you'll notice I already have a virtual machine named Ubuntu 2004, so we're gonna, _2 or something this one. You won't have to do this, but I do because I already have one. And then we'll click next. This is an important setting for how much memory you want to give your virtual machine. I have a ton of memory on my computer, so I have 64 gigs of RAM. You probably won't have that much, but here's some suggestions for sizes that you would do. So if you have 8 gigs of RAM, I would suggest doing 3 gigs in this setting. What is 3 gigabytes? I don't know. You can do 3 times 1024. What is it? 3060, 78. Yeah. No. 3092. Wait, why am I terrible at math right now? 3072. Anyway, I simple mental math. That's because I'm recording, right? So if you have 8 gigs of RAM, I would pick 3. If you have 16 gigs of RAM, 4 or 5 is pretty good. For my machines, do 8 gigs of RAM. It really doesn't matter, and even the minimum will be enough to get by. But I usually like to give my machines a little bit more RAM in case I have to do C compilation, well, C++ compilations, or other stuff that requires more RAM. But once you've set that, you'll click next. This is also an important step, setting up the hard disk for your virtual machine. You don't have to change anything here. You'll click create. I don't change the setting here. I haven't tried the other two. I assume they would work, but I just, haven't bothered fiddling with that yet, and VDI works well enough for me. This is an important setting. So the default is dynamically allocated, and if your disks that you're running on your computer are space constrained, so you don't have that much free space, dynamically allocated is going to be better for you, but it will be slower. I always do fixed size because I have plenty of hard disk space, so I'll check that box. And then we'll pick the size. Normally I will pick 40 gigabytes here, but for the sake of time, I'm going to do 10 gigabytes because allocating a 40 gig fixed size drive actually takes a while. So I'm going to select 10 gigabytes here, but you can, pick a size that works well for you. And if you're using a dynamically allocated drive, this size matters a lot less because it'll start at a small file size and grow as you use more disk space. But fixed size gives you a limit and it pre-allocates it. And pre-allocating is why it's faster to do it that way. And then I'll click create, and this will, it might take longer if you're on spinning media, but I'm on an SSD, so it goes super fast. And before we start it for the first time, I'm actually going to modify some of the settings on this virtual machine. So you'll just right click and then click on settings. And most of the stuff we'll be able to leave alone. So I'm just going to go through each of the tabs and describe to you what settings I'm changing. So first we'll go to advanced. I usually enable shared clipboard, and I do it in a bi-directional way. This makes it so I can copy and paste stuff in and out of my virtual machine, which I frequently do with password managers or like copying and pasting text or URLs or other stuff like that. So I usually enable shared clipboard. If you ever find yourself dragging files around, you might want to enable drag and drop. I find that I never do this, so I don't bother enabling it, but that's what this setting does. Don't need to change the description. I usually don't enable disk encryption. If you want slight amount of additional security, you can do that. But at that point, if your computer's compromised, like disk encryption isn't going to save you for that. Here's again the memory setting that we set before, and I don't usually change any of the other settings here. Number of processors is one that I change. My computer has 12 virtual CPUs. I usually do half minus one, and that seems to be a good balance between starving the host operating system for resources and providing enough processors to the virtual machine. Let's see. I usually check PAE NX. It might not be something you can check on your computer. This depends on the features of your processor and BIOS. The same with VTX. This one might not be checkable. Like you can see, I can't check this box on my computer. So, but I usually check those if they're available. As for acceleration, these I believe are usually always checked. So leave those checked. And the last thing that I customize from the computer settings stuff is the screen video memory. I usually max this out. This may, without doing that in the previous versions of Ubuntu, there was some pretty bad performance stuff that would happen there. And I also check the enable 3D acceleration, but I leave everything else alone. And the last thing that I set up is a shared folder. This will make it so I can copy files in and out of my virtual machine pretty easily. So I'll just go add shared folder, and we'll select a path for that. I usually put it right next to the virtual machine. By default, it'll be in your home directory VirtualBox VMs. Usually I actually put them in a separate place on a separate drive, but I forgot to do that. So you guys will just see the, this is slightly off screen. There we go. So I usually make another folder here, Ubuntu 20.04.2 shared. And I usually just name it the same as the virtual machine and then underscore shared at the end. The name really doesn't matter all that much, but we'll do that, pick the path, and try again. Let's try this again. Maybe it's because I clicked around. VirtualBox VMs, maybe I have to make the folder. We'll try that. Okay, that worked. Fiddly. And I also check this auto mount option here. This will make it so that it automatically shows up as a mount, and you don't have to run sudo mount every time you want to play with shared folders. In older versions of VirtualBox, you would have to run the mount command anyway, even if you didn't have this setting. So then we'll do OK, and OK. And now we're ready for our first boot. And so we'll click Start here. And, oh, that's off screen. Oh no! Well, we'll go back to the full screen so we can see this, and then we'll drag it into the corner. But this is actually asking me for a startup disk. Oh, I guess I can move this over here so then you guys can see the text there. It's asking me for a startup disk. This is the Linux image that you downloaded earlier. So you'll click this button here. I happen to have 2004 desktop AMD ISO, this 2.5 gigabyte file. And so I'll click OK on that. And then we'll click Start for the first time. I should be able to drag this over before it prompts me again. And this will be our first boot of this, and we'll basically click through the installer and get everything set up. Oh no, it's off screen. No! There we go. Close enough, right? But basically it's just expanding out that disk image that we had before, and it will start the installer pretty soon. Oh, I can't see the nice logo. Maybe we'll go back to the zoomed out view so you can just see all of this. We can probably see the title bar too. But there's going to be a lot of hurry up and wait as part of this process, and so sorry for the dead air. We'll click this install button here. That shall get us started. If you have a special keyboard, you'll configure it here. I just have an English keyboard, so I can do continue. And this is an important step, depending on how you're going to use this machine. The default installation, the normal installation of Ubuntu, installs a bunch of things that I just simply don't use, like things like Office, Office utilities, games, media players, etc. Stuff. So I click the minimal installation. This will also make it faster to set up. And depending on, I sometimes check this box, but it won't matter for our virtual machines. If you're doing a desktop installation, usually check this box. And then we'll click continue. And what are you going to do next? Now we wait. Yeah, and then we click install now. And don't worry about this pop-up, it sounds scary, like what is SCSI? Those of you that have done hardware in the 90s know what SCSI is, but no, it's kind of funny that VirtualBox emulates SCSI for this, but doesn't matter. You can just click continue. And a few more prompts. You can set your time zone. And here's where you're going to set the name of the computer and your username. Now, if you don't log into other machines via SSH, this doesn't really matter. But I do, and my username on those machines is acetilly, so I make sure to match that here. Your computer name doesn't matter, you can always change it later. I usually do something Mimi, or you can just leave the default. I recommend having a password, but the password doesn't really matter that much. It's mostly just so that you don't accidentally run sudo on the wrong thing. So like, a bad password is okay here. So like that password is just password. And yeah, it's a weak password, but it's like here I'm just trying to protect myself against doing dumb things. You can pick a stronger password if you want. It's just less important, in my opinion. And I usually check this require my password to log in. You can log in automatically, though I've seen weird bugs where this, messes up the desktop environment. But yeah, it probably works. I've just been burned by it, so I don't do it. And then you click continue, and it will finish the installation for you. And I guess we could go back to the zoomed in one. Oh no, that cuts off. Oh well. We'll have this one. But yeah, this is running Linux inside of your outer operating system. And I didn't mention it earlier, but I'm running Windows, but this will work on macOS or Linux as well. VirtualBox is cross-platform. There are other virtual machine managers that I've used in the past. So like there's one that Apple makes called Parallels, or maybe Apple doesn't make it, but it's only designed for Macs, called Parallels, that I've used before. It worked all right for me. There were some weird bugs though. And I've heard good things about VMware, but also haven't used them either. But VirtualBox has worked well for me, so I just continue. Like, if it's not broken, don't fix it. So I continue to use VirtualBox. It works well enough. But yeah, we'll basically just watch this finish the install. There's a couple of things that we'll want to do after the installation, so we'll just sit here and twiddle our thumbs, play with a fidget spinner. Usually this doesn't take too long for the first install, or the initial setup. But, you know, this is this is where I would check chat in my Twitch stream. If you want to check out my Twitch stream, it's twitch.tv/AnthonyWrightsCode. Shameless self-promotion. So how's your day going? My day's going fine. Fine? That's not a word. And I had an interesting question. So if you'll if you watch the end of this, it's actually removing a bunch of software here. And I believe the reason for this is the disk image contains a bunch of stuff that is not needed for the minimal install, and so it just like splats it all onto disk and then removes stuff later. The other theory that I have is that there's some software that's only needed during the installer, and then it uninstalls the installer at the end. I don't really know which one is true, but either of those could possibly explain what's going on. But oh, and this is a fossa. This is the animal that Ubuntu 2004 is named after. I believe this is the photo from Wikipedia. Actually, we can just check that. Fossa. Yes, although it's flipped. So I don't know why they flipped it. But yes, the fossa is an animal that's only in Madagascar. But the way Ubuntu names their releases is a adjective and then an animal, and they go in alphabetical order. And actually, they recently wrapped around, so there was, what was it, Zesty, I don't remember. The last release was Zesty, some animal that starts with Z. Probably zebra would be the guess there. Ubuntu Zesty. What was it called? Zesty Zappus. But then they wrapped around to the beginning of the alphabet again because they ran out of letters. And oh no, 1 minute remaining. We might cut back when this is done. Let me just stop the recording and I'll see you guys when this is finished. Alright, we're back. It just finished, so now we're gonna click this Restart Now button and that'll take us through the rest of this. And yeah, so please remove the installation medium and press enter. We don't actually have any installation media plugged in because there's no CD drive, and so we will just press enter. And then some glitchy stuff happens and VirtualBox 6 starts for the second time. And I'm going to guide you through setting up guest editions, and then we'll be done with the virtual machine setup. This is type our password in here. And the guest editions are necessary so that the features like the clipboard and, you know, drag and drop and shared folders work properly. Without the guest editions, those things don't work. I'm going to skip all of these things. Skip. Next. I don't want to send system info, and location services isn't going to help for a virtual machine. And then done. So I'm going to open up a terminal. The keyboard shortcut for that is Control-Alt-T. And that opens a terminal, but if you don't want to use the keyboard shortcut, you can do the Windows key or Command key and then type terminal here. Open that. We're going to install 3 packages so that guest editions can build from source. And to do that, we're going to do sudo apt update and sudo apt install. I should make this bigger so you guys can see it. So we're going to do sudo apt update and sudo apt install gcc, perl, and make. And to make it go faster, I'm going to do no install recommends. And we'll type our password. And this is going to install 3 packages that are needed to build the guest editions from source. Because it builds a kernel module that makes things work better. And how long is that going to take? Hopefully not too long. And just installing some stuff. Cool. And once that is done, you will go to the Devices menu in your virtual machine, and you will click Insert Guest Editions CD Image. And that will mount a special CD into your virtual machine, and you'll see a prompt like this, VirtualBox GA6020. Your version will probably be different, and then you'll click Run, and you'll type your password, and it will open a terminal similar to before, and it will install the kernel module for you. And once that is done, you will reboot your machine one last time, and that will finish your setup, and you should be good to go on your new Ubuntu installation, or whatever distribution you choose, because this setup is going to be similar for any other Linux distribution that you pick. But it runs a bunch of stuff, and then should be finished pretty soon. Yeah, here we go. Running kernel modules will not be replaced until the system is restarted. Press return to close this window. And then you'll reboot by, going to this and then power off and then restart, and that'll restart it. But anyway, hopefully this was helpful and you can see how I set up my environment. I have a set of scripts that install a bunch of software after that, but yeah, we won't go over those because it requires a bunch of waiting time. It's almost 20 minutes of installing for that. But anyway, thank you for watching. Hopefully you guys enjoyed, and if you have additional suggestions for things you want me to explain, or tutorials or setup or whatever, leave a comment below, or hang out in my Twitch chat or anything like that. But thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys around in the next one.